They fired the janitor's son for a small mistake, then his father walked in, the CEO who owned the building. The sterile white walls of Thornecorp's executive conference room seemed to hum with an unspoken tension, a silence that pressed down on the two figures seated opposite the unassuming janitor. Lysander Thorne, a man whose silver hair and stooped shoulders now belonged to Arthur Finch, the humble custodian, watched Gareth Meade, the district manager, and Vivian Holloway, the head of human resources, with a quiet intensity that belied his outward demeanor. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on Lysander's lips, a private amusement at the scene unfolding before him. He had seen this play countless times, always from a distance, but never quite like this, never from the humble vantage point of the dismissed, never as the seemingly powerless. "And so, Mr. Arthur Finch," Vivian Holloway began, her voice a polished blade, cutting through the silence. Her gaze, as sharp and unforgiving as her tailored suit, swept over Lysander, dismissing him with a casual disdain that was almost admirable in its consistency. It was the look one might give a particularly stubborn stain, not a human being. Lysander believed she viewed all employees, particularly those deemed low-ranking, as inconvenient smudges on the corporate landscape, easily wiped away. "I believe we were just concluding our evaluation of your performance. As Gareth was explaining, your tenure here, though brief, has unfortunately been less than exemplary." Gareth Meade, a man whose girth strained the seams of his expensive shirt, leaned back in his leather chair, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. He gestured dismissively with a hand adorned with a heavy gold ring, a gaudy symbol of his perceived success. "Frankly, Arthur, you're an embarrassment. Always lurking, always sweeping. It's almost as if you think this building needs constant attention. We hired you for light duties, not to be a shadow." He chuckled, a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate with his own self-importance, a sound Lysander had come to associate with his petty cruelties. "And honestly, the way you speak to people, the way you hover, it's unsettling. We've had complaints." Lysander knew these complaints were likely manufactured, exaggerated grievances from those who resented the watchful eyes of a janitor who simply did his job too thoroughly, who saw too much. He had, indeed, been lurking and hovering, observing every nuance of their characters, every casual cruelty, every calculated dismissal. His true identity, the formidable Lysander Thorne, founder and CEO of this very empire, remained a delicious secret, a coiled spring ready to unleash a torrent of long-overdue retribution. "Yes, Mr. Finch," Vivian interjected, her tone hardening further, "if that were possible. And your recent involvement in certain personnel matters has come to our attention. Your unsolicited opinions, your emotional outbursts when we were simply enforcing company policy, it's unprofessional. Highly unprofessional." Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing him as if he were a particularly stubborn stain, something to be eradicated. "You even had the audacity to question our decision regarding Orion Thorne. A young man who proved himself utterly incapable of handling even the simplest tasks. A liability, frankly." Gareth snorted, a derisive sound. "Orion Thorne? Please." The kid was a walking disaster. One minor clerical error, yes, but it was symptomatic of a larger problem. A lack of attention to detail, a casual disregard for procedure. We had no choice but to let him go. And you, Arthur, defending him? It shows a remarkable lack of judgment on your part." Lysander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Orion, his own son, dismissed for a minor clerical error. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth, acrid and sharp. He had placed Orion in that low-level position precisely to see if the company's meritocracy still functioned, if a young man could rise based on talent rather than connections. And he had found his answer. A resounding, disappointing no, echoed in the hollow pronouncements of these two executives. "So, Arthur," Vivian continued, folding her hands neatly on the polished conference table, a predatory smile touching her lips, a smile of ultimate triumph. Given these numerous infractions, your general unsuitability for the role, and your unfortunate lack of understanding regarding corporate decorum, we have decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Gareth leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Consider it a blessing, old man. This kind of work isn't for everyone. Perhaps you can find something more suited to your limited talents. Maybe a retirement home? They always need someone to dust. His laughter boomed, a crude, dismissive sound that echoed in the otherwise silent room, reverberating with his own petty victory. Lysander, however, remained impassive. His eyes, though aged, gleamed with an almost supernatural light, a reflection of the immense power held in check. He looked from Gareth to Vivian, a silent assessment taking place, a final confirmation of their moral bankruptcy. They were still so utterly oblivious, so consumed by their petty power and inflated self-importance. The game, as he had planned it, was indeed over. And they, unknowingly, had just played their final, disastrous move. A profound sense of calm settled over Lysander, a stillness before the storm. He straightened his shoulders, the movement subtle but imbued with an authority that had been absent from Arthur Finch. The smirk returned, this time more pronounced, a precursor to the storm about to break. You speak of limited talents, Lysander finally said. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer the soft, unassuming murmur of Arthur Finch. It was deep, resonant, and carried the undeniable weight of command, the voice that had built an empire. And of termination. How truly ironic. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a premonition of the seismic shift about to occur. Because the only thing being terminated today, gentlemen and ladies, is your careers. And frankly, your presence in this company. The game, as you so aptly put it, is indeed over. But you were never the players. You were merely pawns. Vivian and Gareth exchanged bewildered glances, their smiles faltering, the first flicker of uneasy comprehension crossing their arrogant faces. The janitor, Arthur, had never spoken with such conviction, such veiled threat. A cold dread, a premonition of something terrible, began to coil in their stomachs, a serpent of fear uncoiling. They had no idea that the man they had just summarily dismissed, the man they had scorned and humiliated, was the very architect of their downfall, the silent titan who owned the ground they stood upon. To understand Lysander Thorne's elaborate deception, one had to delve into the labyrinthine corridors of his past, a past paved with ambition, staggering success, and, ultimately, profound disillusionment. Lysander, at 72, was a titan, the undisputed founder and CEO of Thorne Corp., a sprawling empire built on real estate and corporate acquisitions that spanned continents. His name was synonymous with power, wealth, and an almost mythical shrewdness in business, a legend whispered in financial circles. Yet, the very world he had painstakingly built, the magnificent edifice of Thorne Corp., had, in recent years, begun to curdle in his estimation, like milk left too long in the sun. The seed of his discontent had been sown gradually, nurtured by a growing sense of detachment from the very core values he believed Thorne Corp once embodied. He had started with a vision of creating not just a profitable enterprise, but a place where talent was nurtured, loyalty rewarded, and integrity upheld. He remembered the early days, the camaraderie, the shared passion, the genuine belief in their mission. However, as the conglomerate swelled, reaching stratospheric heights, becoming a leviathan of industry, a pervasive rot had set in. The relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of quarterly profit had eclipsed all else. Empathy had been replaced by cold efficiency reports, human connection by transactional networking opportunities. Lysander watched in dismay as executives, some of whom he had personally mentored from humble beginnings, devolved into ruthless caricatures of their former selves, their eyes gleaming with avarice, their words hollow with corporate platitudes. They spoke of synergy and optimization while subtly, And sometimes not so subtly, cutting corners, exploiting vulnerabilities, and discarding employees as if they were mere cogs in a machine, easily replaced, their humanity forgotten. He saw a growing disregard for the little people, those whose quiet dedication formed the backbone of the company. His once trusted lieutenants, men and women who had risen through the ranks with him, now seemed to prioritize their opulent bonuses over the well-being of their subordinates, their personal prestige over the company's long-term health. Gareth Meade, the district manager, was a prime example of this insidious transformation. Lysander had watched Gareth, over the years, transform from a diligent, if somewhat unimaginative, manager into a bloated, arrogant tyrant, obsessed with superficial metrics and quick to blame others for his own shortcomings. Gareth would routinely dismiss valid employee concerns with a wave of his hand, favoring cronies and sycophants who echoed his every word, and had a particular talent for making those below him feel utterly worthless, crushing spirits with a casual remark. He was a micro-tyrant in his own fiefdom, and his district, once a model of efficiency, had become a hotbed of quiet resentment. Vivian Holloway, the head of human resources, was another source of profound disappointment, a betrayal of trust. Lysander had initially seen her as a sharp, intelligent woman who could bring structure and fairness to the company's personnel policies, a beacon of justice. But Vivian had, over time, become a rigid, unyielding enforcer of rules, devoid of any genuine empathy. She wielded policies like weapons, using them to justify cold, often heartless, decisions that left individuals broken. Her interpretations of company guidelines were always in favor of the company's bottom line, never its human capital, never the people who poured their lives into Thorne Corp. She reveled in her power to terminate, to control, to reduce individuals to mere numbers on a spreadsheet, their stories and struggles irrelevant. Lysander had overheard her on multiple occasions, discussing employees' lives and livelihoods with the detached precision of a surgeon dissecting a specimen, their pain merely an interesting data point. But it wasn't just the executives who fueled his disillusionment. It was the overall culture, the casual dismissiveness that permeated the very air of Thorne Corp, a suffocating blanket of apathy. The whispers of "it's just business," the way good ideas from lower ranks were often stifled or brazenly stolen by those above, the subtle politics and backstabbing that became commonplace, a viper's nest of ambition. Lysander felt a growing chasm between his initial noble vision and the harsh reality of the empire he had created. He felt like a king whose once noble knights had become common bandits, plundering the very kingdom they swore to protect, loyal only to their own greed. The final impetus for his radical plan came with his son, Orion. Lysander had always kept Orion largely out of the spotlight, wanting him to forge his own path, free from the immense, overshadowing legacy of the Thorne name. He had watched Orion navigate his early career with a mix of fatherly pride and growing concern. Orion was intelligent, earnest, and possessed a quiet resilience that Lysander admired, a strength of character that shone through. However, Lysander also knew that Orion, shielded by his father's immense success, had never truly faced the harsh, unforgiving realities of the corporate world from the ground up, never felt the sting of dismissiveness or the crushing weight of systemic indifference. He needed to be tested, not by a doting father, but by the very system his father had built, stripped of any privilege. Lysander conceived a daring, almost theatrical, plan, a masterstroke of observation. He would shed his identity, disappear from the opulent executive suites, and re-emerge as Arthur Finch, a humble, elderly janitor. This disguise would grant him unprecedented, unfiltered access to the true pulse of Thorne Corp, allowing him to observe his employees, from the mailroom clerks to the most senior executives, without the filters of deference, flattery, or fear. He wanted to see how they treated the invisible workforce, the people who cleaned their offices and emptied their bins, the silent custodians of their comfort. He wanted to hear the unfiltered whispers, the genuine complaints, the true sentiments of those who were usually too afraid to speak up, to peel back the corporate veneer. He meticulously planned every detail, every minute aspect of his transformation. He feigned a sudden, severe illness, announcing a long sabbatical for rest and recovery, a convenient cover. He appointed a temporary, trusted interim CEO, a man he knew would maintain the status quo without making any radical changes, thus preserving the environment he wished to observe in its current, corrupted state. He then underwent a remarkable physical transformation. He adopted a slightly stooped posture that affected his back, perfected a shuffling gait, and used subtle makeup to enhance the appearance of age and weariness, even learning to modulate his deep, resonant voice into a softer, unassuming murmur. He chose the name Arthur Finch, a deliberately unassuming moniker, and fabricated a backstory of a retired, struggling widower seeking light employment to make ends meet, a tale of quiet desperation. He even went as far as to set up a new, modest apartment in a different part of the city, complete with the sparse, worn furnishings of a man living on a meager pension, fully immersing himself in the role. The crucial element of his plan was Orion. Lysander secretly arranged for his son to be hired in a low-level administrative role within Thorne Corp, ensuring he would start at the very bottom, without any special treatment or knowledge of his father's true identity or his presence in the building. This was Orion's test, an opportunity for Lysander to assess not only his son's resilience and character under pressure but also the company's fairness, its ability to recognize inherent worth. Would Orion's innate abilities be recognized and nurtured, or would he be crushed by the very corporate machinery that had begun to erode Lysander's own soul? Lysander's heart, though heavy with the weight of his profound disillusionment, was also alight with a strange, fierce hope. He yearned to find genuine decency amidst the corporate avarice, to unearth acts of compassion and integrity that would rekindle his faith in humanity, and in the company he had poured his life into. He knew the journey would be arduous, fraught with indignity, exposing him to casual cruelty, but the truth, he believed, was worth any price, any personal discomfort. He was about to descend into the belly of his own beast, a silent, watchful judge, ready to deliver a verdict that would shake Thorne Corp to its very foundations, a reckoning that was long overdue. The transition from the opulent corner office, with its panoramic city views and hushed luxury, to the echoing, fluorescent-lit corridors of Thorne Corp at night was a jarring one for Lysander. As Arthur Finch, he donned his ill-fitting janitor's uniform, the rough, scratchy fabric a stark contrast to the custom-tailored suits he was accustomed to. He clutched his mop and bucket, a silent observer in his own empire, invisible to the very people who benefited from his wealth. The irony was a constant companion, a wry smile playing on his lips even as he scrubbed floors and emptied overflowing waste bins, a poignant reminder of his current, humble station. He learned the rhythm of the night shift, the peculiar solitude of the empty offices, the subtle sounds of the building settling down. He noticed the forgotten coffee cups, the discarded dreams in the waste bins, the silent tales of the day. His first encounters with Vivian Holloway and Gareth Meade were exactly as he had anticipated, and yet, more galling than he could have imagined. They treated him with an open, almost theatrical condescension that bordered on cruelty, as if his mere presence was an affront. One crisp Tuesday morning, Lysander, as Arthur, was meticulously buffing the marble floors of the main lobby, striving for a gleam that mirrored the company's former aspirations. Gareth Meade, resplendent in a ridiculously expensive suit, strode through, talking loudly on his phone, his voice echoing in the grand space. He barely glanced at Arthur, his eyes fixed on some distant, self-important thought. But as he passed, Gareth deliberately scuffed his polished shoe across a spot Arthur had just painstakingly cleaned, leaving a dark, muddy mark. Without breaking his phone conversation, Gareth then pointed at the mark with his free hand, grunted, and walked away, expecting Arthur to immediately re-clean it, a silent demand issued to an invisible servant. Arthur, his back aching slightly from the stoop, knelt and scrubbed the mark away, his eyes observing Gareth's retreating figure, memorizing the casual cruelty of the gesture. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just the silent demand of a master to a servant, a small, petty assertion of power over someone perceived as utterly insignificant. Lysander recognized the gesture immediately. It was a test of obedience, a sign of Gareth's deep-seated need to exert dominance over others. Another time, Arthur was collecting rubbish from the executive offices, a task he often used as an excuse to linger and listen. He paused outside Vivian Holloway's pristine office, where she was loudly lecturing a trembling junior assistant, Miss Jenkins, about a misplaced file. "Do you understand, Miss Jenkins?" Vivian's voice cut through the air like shards of glass, sharp and unforgiving. "This isn't a kindergarten. This is Thorne Corp. Precision, efficiency, and absolute adherence to protocol are not suggestions, they are mandates. One single misplaced document can unravel an entire deal. What is wrong with you people? Are you intentionally trying to sabotage the company? Or are you simply intellectually inferior?" The assistant, a young woman with anxious eyes, stammered apologies, her face pale. As Arthur moved to empty Vivian's bin, he accidentally brushed against the doorframe, a slight, almost imperceptible contact. Vivian's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing, fixing him with a glare of pure irritation. "Finch! Must you lurk about like a specter? You're disturbing the peace. Do your job quietly, or don't do it at all. And don't you dare come near my desk. I don't need your germs anywhere near my workspace." She spoke as if he were an infestation, not a human being, her words dripping with disgust. Lysander, usually a man of immense composure, felt a surge of cold fury, a familiar prick of indignation. This was the woman in charge of human resources, the very department meant to protect employees, to foster a healthy working environment. Her actions spoke volumes about the depth of Thorne Corp's decay. His observations of Orion were equally illuminating, and often heartbreaking. Lysander watched his son from afar, during lunch breaks in the bustling cafeteria, in crowded corridors, and occasionally, through the glass walls of his cubicle, a silent, protective presence. Orion, true to his nature, was diligent, earnest, and eager to learn, his youthful enthusiasm still untainted by cynicism. He stayed late, asked insightful questions of his colleagues, and tried to help them whenever he could, a genuine team player. Yet, he seemed to be stuck in a mire of bureaucracy and indifference, his efforts unrecognized, his potential untapped. His ideas, often innovative and well-researched, were often dismissed out of hand by his immediate supervisor, a mid-level manager named Brenda, who was herself under Gareth's thumb, terrified of displeasing him. Or worse, Orion's good ideas were subtly appropriated by Brenda and presented as her own, leaving Orion with nothing but the satisfaction of knowing he was right, a hollow victory. Orion never complained, never shirked his duties, even when given menial or seemingly pointless tasks, his quiet resilience shining through. Lysander felt a profound pang of pride mixed with a growing sense of injustice. His son, a diamond in the rough, was being ground down by the very corporate system designed to identify and polish such gems, a system that was failing. Amidst this landscape of corporate callousness, a beacon of genuine human kindness emerged in the unlikely form of Barnaby "Barney" O'Malley, the elderly, observant security guard. Barney was a man of quiet dignity, his uniform always neat, his eyes, though tired from years of watching, missing nothing. He was often overlooked, a part of the building's furniture, yet his heart beat with an unwavering compassion, a warmth that radiated outwards. Lysander first encountered Barney late one evening. Arthur had been struggling to push a heavy cart laden with cleaning supplies up a small incline to the loading bay. His old bones ached, and his disguised stoop was becoming genuinely painful, a constant reminder of his physical act. Barney, seeing his struggle from his security desk, had quietly approached, his step soft. "Here, old-timer," he said, his voice gruff but kind, a surprising tenderness in his tone, "let me give you a hand. That cart looks heavier than a politician's conscience." He took the handle without waiting for a reply, and with surprising strength for a man his age, helped Arthur push the cart with ease. He didn't ask for thanks, he just offered a small, knowing smile, a simple act of human connection. On another occasion, Arthur had accidentally spilled a bucket of dirty water in a busy hallway, a minor catastrophe that felt enormous in the moment. Before he could even react, a torrent of angry shouts erupted from passing executives, their voices sharp with irritation. "Watch where you're going, old man. Are you blind? This is a disgrace. Someone could sue." Lysander felt the familiar prick of indignation, the humiliation of being treated as an incompetent nuisance. But before he could even apologize, Barney was there, calmly placing a bright yellow wet floor sign and kneeling beside Arthur, ignoring the angry executives. "Don't you worry about them, Arthur," Barney murmured, his voice low, confidential. "Accidents happen. Let's get this cleaned up before someone actually falls and blames you." He even lent a hand, wiping the edges of the spill with a paper towel he pulled from his pocket, a silent act of solidarity. The simple act of solidarity, of treating him as a fellow human being instead of an inconvenience, resonated deeply with Lysander, a stark contrast to the disdain he usually received. Barney also displayed an uncanny observational skill, a quiet wisdom gained from years of watching. He seemed to notice everything, particularly the injustices that often went unremarked. Lysander heard him once, quietly comforting a young intern who had been publicly humiliated by Gareth Meade for a trivial mistake. "Don't you mind him, son," Barney had said, his hand briefly, gently resting on the intern's trembling shoulder. "That man's bark is worse than his bite, but his bite's only on those who can't bite back. You keep your head up. Good work always gets noticed eventually, even if it's not by the ones who make the most noise." His words were simple, yet profound, a balm to the intern's wounded spirit. Barney's kindness extended to Orion as well, a silent guardian angel in the sterile corporate environment. Lysander observed a particular incident that brought a lump to his throat. Orion had forgotten his lunch at home one day, and with a tight deadline looming, didn't have time to leave the building, visibly stressed and hungry. Barney, during his rounds, noticed Orion's quiet despair, his subtle glances at his empty stomach. Later that afternoon, as Arthur was cleaning the break room, he saw Barney approach Orion's cubicle, a small brown bag in his hand. "Young man," Barney said, "I happen to have an extra sandwich today. My wife always packs too much. You look like you could use a bite." He offered Orion a neatly wrapped turkey sandwich and an apple, a simple, unsolicited gesture of generosity. Orion's face lit up with genuine gratitude, his eyes widening. "Thank you so much, Mr. O'Malley," he said, his voice filled with relief. "You're a lifesaver." Barney merely nodded and walked away, a small, knowing smile on his lips. He did not seek praise or recognition, his act was pure, unsolicited kindness, a testament to his inherent goodness. These interactions cemented Lysander's convictions. Gareth and Vivian represented the decaying heart of his company, a place where empathy had been systematically eradicated, replaced by a ruthless pursuit of profit and power. Barney, on the other hand, was a testament to the enduring power of human decency, a quiet reminder that goodness could still thrive even in the most sterile and unforgiving environments, a small flame of hope. The tension in the company, particularly around Gareth and Vivian, was palpable, a growing undercurrent of fear. They were increasingly dismissive of everyone, quick to anger, and focused solely on superficial performance metrics, pushing their subordinates to the brink. Lysander overheard them frequently discussing trimming the fat and optimizing the workforce, euphemisms for ruthless layoffs that left families struggling. He knew his time was running out, that the situation was nearing its breaking point. The test, he realized, was nearing its dramatic conclusion. Then came the day Orion made his small mistake. It was a minor clerical error in a large, complex financial report, an easily correctable oversight that would have taken mere minutes to fix, a simple transposition of numbers. But Gareth Meade and Vivian Holloway seized upon it like vultures on carrion, their eyes gleaming with opportunity. They saw it not as an error, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to demonstrate their power, to cut costs by dismissing an employee, and perhaps, to remove a conscientious, yet unaligned, employee like Orion, who didn't fit neatly into their rigid, callous system. Lysander watched, his heart a raw knot in his chest, as Orion was called into Vivian's office, the glass walls offering a cruel window into the unfolding drama. He saw the grim, unyielding faces of Gareth and Vivian through the glass. He saw Orion emerge a short while later, his shoulders slumped, his face pale with shock and disappointment, his dreams shattered. Lysander wanted to rush to him, to reveal everything, to embrace his son and tell him it was all a test, that he was loved and valued. But he held back, a profound internal struggle playing out. The final, most painful part of his test was unfolding, and he needed to witness their full depravity, to see how they would treat his son, and how they would treat him, the unassuming janitor, who had dared to show concern. A few days later, Arthur, having witnessed the unjust dismissal of Orion, approached Vivian Holloway, his faint humility barely masking his internal fury, to express his distress and confusion. "Madam," he had stammered, adopting his most humble demeanor, his voice a soft murmur, "I overheard, about young Mr. Thorne. He seemed a very diligent lad. Was it truly necessary to let him go for such a small error?" Vivian had scoffed, her eyes flashing with irritation, as if he had dared to question a divine decree. "Arthur, I believe I've made myself clear about your unsolicited opinions. It is absolutely necessary. He was a liability. His diligence did not compensate for his lack of attention to detail. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Unlike some people." Gareth, who was also present, had merely laughed, a harsh, grating sound, finding amusement in Arthur's concern. "Don't worry your pretty little head about corporate decisions, Arthur," he had sneered, his voice dripping with superiority. "Leave it to the professionals. You just stick to the mops." The casual cruelty, the blatant disregard for Orion's potential, the dismissive attitude towards Arthur's genuine concern, it was all the confirmation Lysander needed. The contrast between their callousness and Barney's quiet compassion had solidified his resolve, hardening his heart to any thought of clemency. The stage was set. The masks were about to fall. And the reckoning would be swift, and utterly devastating. The atmosphere in the executive conference room was thick with a smug, self-congratulatory air, a palpable sense of victory for Gareth and Vivian. They sat opposite Lysander, alias Arthur Finch, ready to deliver their final, condescending dismissal. They had just finished recounting Arthur's supposed failures, their voices dripping with a feigned regret that barely masked their true disdain. The irony of the situation, the sheer blindness of their arrogance, was almost too much for Lysander to bear. He, the architect of this entire scenario, the true power in the room, was being lectured by the very people whose careers he held in the palm of his hand, about to be casually discarded like a worn-out mop. "As we were saying, Arthur," Vivian began, a thin, triumphant smile playing on her lips, a look of smug satisfaction. "Your services are no longer required. We've decided to go in a different direction. One that doesn't involve unnecessary disruptions or employees who fail to understand their place." Gareth chuckled, adjusting his tie, preening in his moment of perceived authority. "It's for the best, old man. Really. Thorne Corp needs people who are aligned with its vision. Not those who question every decision, or, dare I say, get emotionally invested in the fate of underperforming staff like Orion Thorne." He savored the mention of Orion's name, a final jab. Lysander held their gaze, a flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes. They were so utterly convinced of their own superiority, so oblivious to the precipice they stood upon, dancing on the edge of their own destruction. He had allowed them to speak, to dig their own graves with every arrogant word, every dismissive gesture, every petty insult. He wanted them to savor their moment of perceived victory, to fully bask in it, for it would be the last they would ever have. He slowly, deliberately, reached into the breast pocket of his threadbare janitor's uniform, a garment that felt like a costume, no longer a disguise. Gareth and Vivian watched, mildly curious, expecting perhaps a crumpled handkerchief or a final, desperate plea for clemency, a meek submission. Instead, Lysander pulled out a sleek, black leather wallet, worn smooth from years of handling, a testament to its value. From it, he extracted a card. It was not a staff ID, nor a pension card, nor any form of humble identification. It was a platinum-embossed executive access card, bearing not the name Arthur Finch, but the undeniably familiar Thornecorp logo, and beneath it, in bold, authoritative script, Lysander Thorne, founder and CEO. He placed the card gently on the polished conference table, directly between the two unsuspecting executives. The sound of its soft landing seemed to echo in the sudden, profound silence of the room, a silence that had now taken on a terrifying quality. Vivian Holloway leaned forward, her brow furrowing in confusion, her predatory smile slowly dissolving. Her eyes scanned the card, then darted up to Lysander's face, then back to the card, a frantic dance of disbelief. The thin smile vanished entirely, replaced by a look of bewildered apprehension, the first tendrils of fear. Gareth Meade, too, peered at the card, his earlier smirk dissolving into a look of outright disbelief, his jaw slackening. He picked it up, turned it over, then turned it back again, as if searching for a hidden trick, a false bottom, a way to dismiss the impossible. What is this?" Vivian stammered, her voice losing its polished edge, a tremor of uncertainty creeping in, betraying her carefully constructed composure. This is Lysander Thorne's card. How did you get this?" Her voice was a desperate whisper, unable to grasp the magnitude of what she was seeing. Lysander, still seated, straightened his back, the subtle shift in his posture radiating an immense, undeniable authority, shedding the feigned frailty. The feigned stoop vanished, replaced by the commanding presence of a true leader, a titan in repose. He looked directly at Vivian, his eyes, no longer those of a weary old man, but sharp, incisive, and piercing, stripping away her arrogance. "It is my card, Miss Holloway," Lysander said, his voice now entirely devoid of the humble murmur of Arthur Finch. It was the voice of Lysander Thorne, resonant and unwavering, a voice that had commanded boardrooms and shaped industries for decades, a voice that carried the weight of billions. "And I got it, precisely because it belongs to me." Gareth Meade dropped the card as if it had suddenly turned red hot, his fingers recoiling from the platinum. He stumbled backward in his chair, his face blanching, a dawning horror twisting his features into a grotesque mask. His eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape, a denial, a reason for this impossible reality. No. This is impossible. Mr. Thorne is on sabbatical. He's ill." Lysander pushed himself up from the chair, slowly, deliberately, his movements filled with purpose. He shed the persona of Arthur Finch with every movement, like a snake shedding its skin. His shoulders broadened, his head held high, his gaze unwavering. He walked around the table, retrieved his card, and slipped it back into his wallet, a gesture of absolute command. He then pulled out his own smartphone, a sleek, private model, not the basic flip phone Arthur carried, and tapped a few buttons. The massive monitor on the far wall, usually reserved for company presentations, suddenly flickered to life. It displayed his own executive calendar, complete with a prominently highlighted entry for that very hour, executive board meeting, urgent personnel review. Vivian Holloway gasped, a small, choked sound escaping her lips. Her face, usually so composed, so unreadable, was now a mask of pure terror, her eyes wide with frantic realization. She looked from the screen to the man standing before her, the man she had just humiliated, scorned, and summarily dismissed. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed, each one a nail in her coffin. The janitor who observed everything, the old man who dared to question her decisions, the troublemaker who defended Orion Thorne, it had all been a meticulously crafted deception, a trap she had blithely walked into. Impossible! Gareth blurted out, scrambling to his feet, knocking his chair over in the process, a pathetic clatter. His eyes darted wildly, seeking an escape, a denial, a loophole. You can't be. Lysander Thorne is a multi-billionaire. He doesn't clean toilets. His voice was a desperate plea to an indifferent universe. Indeed, Lysander responded, his tone dangerously calm, a quiet, deadly menace in his voice, he doesn't. But Arthur Finch does. And Arthur Finch has seen quite enough to make a definitive judgment. He then pressed another button on his phone. The door to the conference room swung open silently, revealing two imposing figures, Lysander's personal legal counsel, Ms. Evelyn Reed, a woman known for her razor-sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty, her expression grim, and his chief operations officer, Mr. David Chen, a man of quiet authority, both looking determined and professional. Behind them, standing slightly apart, was Orion Thorne, looking utterly bewildered, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization, his father's uniform still a mystery to him. Ms. Reed, Mr. Chen, Lysander addressed them, his voice ringing with absolute authority, you may now proceed. The internal investigation, which has been ongoing for some months, can now be concluded. The evidence I have personally gathered, combined with the comprehensive reports from your teams, leaves no room for doubt. He turned back to Vivian and Gareth, their faces frozen in expressions of utter shock and despair, their arrogance utterly shattered. Ms. Holloway, Mr. Meade. You have just dismissed the founder and CEO of Thorne Corp. An act of astounding short-sightedness and arrogance, a folly of epic proportions. His gaze hardened, turning into an icy stare that promised no mercy, no quarter. You have systematically fostered a culture of fear and indifference within this company. You have exploited, demeaned, and discarded loyal employees for the sake of your own petty power and inflated bonuses, crushing spirits and destroying livelihoods. And Mr. Meade, you have overseen a district riddled with mismanagement, favoritism, and a complete disregard for ethical conduct, while Ms. Holloway, you have perverted the very purpose of human resources, turning it into an instrument of cruelty and control, a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. He paused, letting the full weight of his words settle upon them, each word a hammer blow. But what truly sealed your fate was your treatment of my son, Orion Thorne, dismissed for a trivial error, simply because he was an easy target, a convenient scapegoat, and because you delighted in exercising your authority over the vulnerable. And your casual cruelty towards Arthur Finch, a man you believed to be an expendable, insignificant janitor, merely served to illuminate the darkness within your own characters, the true measure of your depravity. Orion, hearing his name, stepped forward tentatively, his eyes fixed on his father, then on the janitor's uniform Lysander still wore. The pieces clicked for him too, a flood of understanding. The protective glances, the quiet observations, the unsettling familiarity of Arthur Finch. His father had been right there, watching, enduring, observing. Lysander looked at his son, a small, reassuring nod passing between them, a silent promise of explanation and understanding. Then, his gaze returned to the terrified faces of Vivian and Gareth, their fates sealed. The game, as you so aptly put it, is indeed over, Lysander repeated, his voice now cold, final, absolute. And you, Ms. Holloway and Mr. Meade, have just lost everything. The silence that followed Lysander's pronouncements was deafening, broken only by the frantic, shallow breaths of Vivian Holloway and Gareth Meade. Their faces, once etched with arrogant confidence, were now masks of absolute terror, contorted in a horrifying tableau of disbelief and dawning despair, the realization of their utter ruin. Vivian, ever the first to recover her voice, albeit a shaky imitation of her former steeliness, stammered, "Mr. Thorne, sir, this must be a misunderstanding. A test, perhaps? We were merely enforcing policy." Orion Thorne, he made a mistake, a critical error. And Arthur Finch, we simply believed he wasn't suited for the role. Her words tumbled out, desperate, unconvincing pleas for salvation, a torrent of excuses. Her eyes darted to Ms. Reed, then to Mr. Chen, seeking any sign of leniency, any crack in their resolve, but found only grim, resolute expressions, unyielding and severe. Gareth, even more dramatically, dropped to his knees, his corpulent body shaking, his bravado entirely evaporated. "Mr. Thorne. Sir. Please. I didn't know. How could I have known? I've been a loyal employee for 20 years. This is a joke, right? A prank? Please, don't do this." His voice, usually so booming and confident, was now a pathetic whimper, reduced to desperate groveling, his face streaked with tears. The heavy gold ring on his finger seemed to mock his current posture, a gaudy symbol of the wealth and power he was about to lose, a cruel irony. Lysander watched them, his expression unyielding, devoid of any warmth. There was no pity in his eyes, only a cold, dispassionate resolve, a quiet fury that had finally erupted. He had seen their true colors, felt the sting of their casual cruelty, and witnessed their disregard for the very values he held dear. Mercy, in this instance, would be a betrayal of every loyal employee they had wronged, every spirit they had crushed. "Misunderstanding, Miss Holloway?" Lysander's voice was a low growl, devoid of any warmth or compassion. "I assure you, there is no misunderstanding. This was not a test of your policy adherence, it was a test of your character. A test you both failed spectacularly, unequivocally. Your enforcement of policy has been a thinly veiled excuse for heartless dismissals and the systemic suppression of talent, the stifling of innovation. And Mr. Meade, your loyalty has been to your own inflated ego and bonus checks, not to Thorne Corp or its people, not to the vision I built." He gestured to Ms. Reed, his command absolute. "Ms. Reed, inform our legal team to begin the immediate termination of Ms. Holloway and Mr. Meade. Their access to all company systems and premises will be revoked instantly. All company assets, vehicles, devices, credit cards, company housing, are to be returned by end of business today. Furthermore, given the extensive evidence of their gross misconduct, malicious harassment, and potential misappropriation of company resources that my undercover investigation and your teams have uncovered, I instruct you to initiate a comprehensive forensic audit of their financial dealings and departmental expenditures. Any irregularities found will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, without hesitation." Vivian's face went even paler, a sickly green hue, her eyes wide with a terrifying understanding of the depth of her predicament. "Prosecution? Misappropriation? Sir, you can't. My reputation. My career. I have a family." She rose, stumbling forward as if to grab his arm, to plead for leniency, but was gently intercepted by one of the security personnel who had quietly entered the room with Ms. Reed and Mr. Chen, their presence a silent, imposing barrier. "Your reputation, Ms. Holloway," Lysander stated, his voice chillingly calm, "is precisely what you have cultivated through years of heartless decisions and callous actions. As for your career, it is now irrevocably concluded, a burned bridge. As is yours, Mr. Meade. Your actions speak for themselves. You valued profit over people, power over compassion, greed over integrity. And in doing so, you have demonstrated your complete unsuitability for any position of authority within this company, or, indeed, any reputable organization. You are a cancer, and Thorne Corp will be excised of you." Gareth let out a choked sob, a broken sound. My bonus. My severance. You can't just. I have investments tied up. My house. He looked utterly broken, his bravado entirely evaporated, leaving only a shell of a man. Your severance will be precisely nothing, Mr. Meade, Lysander retorted, his voice like ice, firm and unyielding. You are being dismissed for cause. Gross misconduct. Breach of company ethics. The severance package you so greedily anticipate will instead be repurposed to establish a fund for employees who were unjustly affected by your and Ms. Holloway's draconian policies, a small measure of justice for those you wronged. With a final, withering look, Lysander dismissed them, a gesture of absolute finality. Security, escort them out. Ensure they collect no personal belongings from their offices without supervision. They are no longer welcome on Thornecorp premises, effective immediately. As the security guards, silent and efficient, began to usher the now flailing, protesting Gareth and the utterly devastated Vivian out of the room, their cries echoing down the corridor, Lysander turned his attention to Orion. His son still stood rooted to the spot, a mix of shock, awe, and perhaps a touch of betrayal playing on his face, trying to reconcile the janitor with his father. Orion, Lysander said, his voice softening considerably, the harshness gone, replaced by a deep paternal warmth, my son. Orion finally found his voice, a whisper of disbelief. Father? You were the janitor? Arthur Finch? He shook his head, a stunned smile spreading across his face, a glimmer of understanding. All this time, you watched them, you watched me? Lysander nodded, a gentle affirmation. Every moment. Every casual slight, every act of kindness. I needed to see the true heart of this company, without the filters of my position, without the deferential treatment. And I needed to see you, unburdened by my name, facing the harsh realities of the corporate world, rising or falling on your own merit. You handled yourself with dignity, resilience, and integrity, my son. You passed the test with flying colors, proving your true worth. He then turned to Mr. Chen, a man he deeply respected. David, please ensure Orion's previous dismissal is expunged from all records, as if it never happened. And effective immediately, Orion Thorne will be appointed as my chief of staff. He will work directly with me, learning the ropes from the very top, gaining insight into every facet of this company. He has demonstrated a character sorely lacking in many of our senior executives, a compassion and wisdom beyond his years. Orion's eyes widened further, a gasp escaping his lips, the enormity of the opportunity dawning on him. Finally, Lysander's gaze fell upon a figure who had quietly entered the room during the dramatic reveal, drawn by the commotion, his eyes wide with an emotion that was a mix of awe and profound relief, Barnaby O'Malley, the security guard. Barney, who had observed the entire devastating exchange from the doorway, now stood humbly, almost nervously, clutching his security radio. He had witnessed the downfall of the cruel and the triumph of justice, and a quiet sense of satisfaction settled over his aged features, a peaceful resolution. And Mr. O'Malley, Lysander said, his voice now imbued with genuine warmth, a deep respect for the man before him, please step forward. Barney, startled, shuffled forward, his eyes unsure, his hands clutching his radio. Sir? Mr. Thorne? Lysander extended a hand, not in greeting, but in genuine respect, a gesture of profound gratitude. Mr. O'Malley, as Arthur Finch, I observed your actions. Your unsolicited kindness, your quiet compassion, your unwavering decency. You are a rare and precious commodity in this world, especially in a place like Thornecorp, a beacon of light in the darkness. Barney simply nodded, a flush rising on his weathered cheeks, overwhelmed by the praise. I just try to treat folks the way I'd like to be treated, sir. It's just right. Lysander smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that transformed his stern features, softening them. Indeed, it is. And such rightness will not go unrewarded. Mr. O'Malley, effective immediately, you are promoted to head of security for the entire Thornecorp Global Headquarters. Your salary will be quadrupled, and a comprehensive benefits package, including full medical for you and your wife, will be instated for life. Furthermore, Lysander paused, a mischievous glint in his eye, enjoying the surprise he was about to unleash. I understand you've always admired the view from the penthouse apartment on the 50th floor of the Thorne Tower, the one with the wraparound balcony. Consider it yours. Fully furnished, with all expenses paid, for as long as you wish to live there, a permanent residence of comfort and peace. Barney's jaw dropped. His eyes, usually so sharp and observant, were now swimming with tears, unable to process the magnitude of the gift. Mr. Thorne, sir. I can't. A penthouse? My wife and we've lived in the same little apartment for 40 years. This is too much. His voice broke, thick with emotion, his humble nature unable to comprehend such generosity. He stared at Lysander, then at Orion, then around the luxurious conference room, as if trying to ascertain if this was a dream, if he would wake up to his usual life. It is not too much, Mr. O'Malley, Lysander said, his voice firm but kind, filled with conviction. It is merely what you deserve. A small token of appreciation for a lifetime of quiet integrity and boundless human kindness. Character, Mr. O'Malley, is revealed in the darkness, when no one is watching, when there is no reward in sight. And yours shone brighter than anyone's. Barney, overwhelmed, could only nod, tears silently tracing paths down his wrinkled cheeks. He had given simple kindness, and in return, received a dream beyond his wildest imagination. The balance, in Lysander Thorne's world, had been irrevocably, and justly, restored. Months later, Thornecorp hummed with a different kind of energy, a palpable shift in its very soul. The air, once thick with unspoken tension, fear, and subtle politicking, now felt lighter, more breathable, cleansed. Lysander Thorne, back in his rightful place at the helm, had initiated a sweeping cultural overhaul that permeated every level of the organization. The Thorne principles of integrity and compassion were not just slogans on corporate posters, they were actively championed, enforced, and rewarded. Managers were evaluated not just on profit margins, but on employee satisfaction, mentorship, and ethical conduct, their ability to foster a positive environment. A new internal ombudsman office, directly accountable to Lysander, had been established to ensure that no voice, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, went unheard, that every concern was addressed with fairness and respect. Lysander also initiated a mentorship program for young, promising talent, ensuring that future Orions would be nurtured, not crushed. Orion Thorne, now Lysander's chief of staff, had blossomed in his new role. He absorbed every lesson, every strategic nuance, from his father, proving to be an eager and capable student, but he also brought his own unique perspective, tempered by his experience as just another employee. He advocated passionately for employee welfare programs, championed initiatives that fostered collaboration over competition, and proved to be an invaluable bridge between the executive suite and the ground-level workforce. The brief, harsh experience of being just another employee had forged in him a profound empathy and a fierce determination to ensure no one else suffered the indignities he had witnessed, or the injustices his father sought to rectify. He understood now the true weight of his father's actions, and the immense responsibility that came with their name, not just wealth, but integrity. Barney O'Malley was thriving as the head of security. He moved through the building with a renewed spring in his step, his eyes still sharp, but now reflecting a quiet joy, a contentment he had never imagined. He was no longer just a guard, he was a respected member of the executive team, his opinions on security and, surprisingly, on employee morale, genuinely valued, his quiet wisdom sought out. His wife, initially shocked by the sudden change in their fortunes, had embraced their new life in the opulent penthouse with a delighted sense of wonder, finding joy in every new luxury. Barney often found himself looking out over the sprawling city from his new home, a small, contented smile on his face, the lights twinkling like promises. He knew, deep in his heart, that true wealth lay not in money, but in the simple acts of goodness that ripple outwards, eventually returning in unexpected, beautiful ways, a testament to karma's gentle hand. Vivian Holloway and Gareth Meade, meanwhile, found themselves adrift in the harsh currents of the corporate world, their once secure lives utterly shattered. Their reputations irrevocably tainted by the very public scandal of Lysander Thorne's undercover operation and their subsequent dismissal for gross misconduct, their names whispered in cautionary tales. Gareth's extravagant lifestyle quickly evaporated, his properties foreclosed, his once impressive network abandoning him like rats from a sinking ship. He was left isolated, his bluster and charm useless without his position. Vivian struggled to find any employment, her name now synonymous with ruthless inflexibility and a chilling lack of empathy, a pariah in her own field. The detailed forensic audit Lysander had ordered uncovered several questionable financial transactions within their departments, leading to further investigations and the very real threat of legal action, perhaps even criminal charges. They were left with nothing but the bitter taste of their own hubris, a stark testament to the swift and unforgiving hand of justice, their world reduced to a desolate, lonely ruin. Lysander Thorne, watching the evolution of his company and the flourishing lives of those he had helped, felt a peace he hadn't known in years, a profound sense of accomplishment. His grand experiment had confirmed his worst fears about the pervasive greed and superficiality that had infected his empire, the rot he had sensed. But it had also, crucially, rekindled his faith in the fundamental goodness of humanity, embodied by men like Barney, a glimmer of hope in a cynical world. He had weeded out the rot, nurtured the nascent seeds of integrity, and ensured that Thorne Corp, under Orion's eventual leadership, would be a place where character truly mattered, a legacy built on compassion and fairness, not just profit. The events at Thorne Corp served as a stark, timeless reminder that true character is not revealed in the glare of success or the comfort of authority, but in the quiet, often unobserved, moments of darkness and adversity. It is then, when one believes no one is watching, when there is no reward, that the true measure of a person's compassion, integrity, or cruelty comes to light. And as Lysander Thorne had so powerfully demonstrated, kindness, however small or seemingly insignificant, always finds its way back, blossoming into rewards far beyond imagination, while hypocrisy and heartlessness inevitably lead to a desolate, lonely ruin. If this story of transformation and justice resonated with you, you're in the right place. Our channel is filled with more incredible tales of hidden identities, shocking reveals, and the triumph of good over greed. Don't miss out on another compelling narrative. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. And now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Lysander Thorne's undercover operation? Have you ever witnessed a similar act of hidden kindness or blatant cruelty in your own life? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights truly bring these stories to life.